Today, we will be exploring the history between Canada and the Indigenous peoples, including the Indian Act, residential schools, and the 60s Scoop, and reconciliation.
Understanding this history helps us learn how past government policies affected Indigenous communities and why reconciliation is important today.
Relationship between Indigenous people and Europeans before the 1800s. Before European people arrived, Indigenous people lived on these lands for thousands of years.
When Europeans first arrived, many Indigenous nations traded with them and shared knowledge about land, survival, and transportation.
These relationships were often based on cooperation, but over time, more European settlements led to conflict over land and resources.
In 1876, the Canadian government created the Indian Act.
The Indian Act gave government full control over many First Nations people's lives, including reserved land, leadership, education, and legal status.
It was created to encourage assimilation, meaning government wanted Indigenous people to adopt European culture and ways of life.
The Act limited Indigenous people's self-government and restricted some cultures' traditions. Many of its effects are still felt today. Residential schools.
One of the most harmful government policies was the residential school system.
Indigenous children were took away from their family and friends and sent to church-run schools, often far away from home.
The purpose was to assimilate children by removing them from their cultures and languages.
Many children experienced loneliness, abuse, poor living conditions, and a ton of loss of culture.
The impacts of residential schools continue through intergenerational trauma and culture loss.
The 60s Scoop. During the 60s Scoop, thousands of Indigenous children were removed from their families by the welfare agencies.
Many were adopted into non-Indigenous families and lost connections to their culture, language, and communities.
Reconciliation. In 2008, the Canadian government formally apologized for the residential school system.
The Truth and Reconciliation Commission collected stories from survivors and released 94 calls to action in 2015.
According to Legacy of Hope Foundation, Canadians can support reconciliation by learning about Indigenous history, listening to Indigenous voices, and challenging racism and stereotypes.
Reconciliation means building respectful relationships between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples and working towards a better future for all of us.
Conclusion. In the relationship between Canada and the Indigenous people has included both cooperation and injustice.
By understanding the past and taking action today, we can help create a more respectful and inclusive Canada.
Now you may be wondering, Holden, how can we move forward? Well, reconciliation is more than apologizing for past mistakes. It's about taking action to build a better relationship between Indigenous people and non-Indigenous people for the future.
As Canadians, we can move forward by learning about Indigenous history and understanding the impacts of residential schools, the Indian Act, and the 60s Scoop.
We can also listen to Indigenous voices and challenge stereotypes and racism and support Indigenous cultures, languages, and communities.
Schools, governments, and individuals can work towards the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's 94 calls to action, which provide recommendations for creating a positive change.
Moving forward means recognizing the past, respecting Indigenous rights, and working together to create a more equal and inclusive Canada.
The relationships between Canada and Indigenous peoples has included both cooperation and injustice.
By learning from past and supporting reconciliation, Canadians can help build a future based on respect and understanding and fairness.
One Lord, I'm